But this isn't going to be war with Wes. I'm always excited to get Wes Davenport on of the Pistons Pin Down and a bunch of other podcasts. I think we might have lost him here. We're having some connection issues with him. So Big G's going to venture to get him back, but we have made contact with him, so hopefully we'll be able to get him on. Otherwise, Big G and I will pick up the conversation here. We're having some communication issues with our phone, but I'm excited to get his takes on the Pistons because this is a team that has done very well here this year, but the discussion seems to always center around who they're going to add in the off season or in the mid season here up until the trade deadline. It's never, oh well, they've got a good enough team, they're 20-5, I think, at this point. They're the top team in the East. They're going to be competitive. Not a lot of the pundits, quote unquote, are considering them as a real threat to win the Eastern Conference as a whole, and that's interesting to me because I think this team could do it. They highlighted at the beginning of the season how wide open this was, and how we have a wide open Eastern Conference, how Boston doesn't have Jason Tatum, Indiana doesn't have Tyrese Halliburton, and so teams like Orlando and other teams got a bit aggressive. Detroit didn't do that. They made kind of some lower key acquisitions. I think we've got Wes on the line. This is a good place to start with him, actually, if he's on the line, because Wes, this is a team that you've watched for a long time, covered for a long time, and it's interesting to me for a team that's atop the Eastern Conference where the conversation isn't about how dominant they've been, how deep they've been. It's, hey, who are they going to add to this team here?
Yeah, it is interesting, and thank you for having me on. Sorry for the technical issues.
No
I think
problem.
it was on my end, so my apologies for that. But excited to be here as always. But yeah, it's interesting how much of the online conversation in like national media is just like you said. It's on trying to make some sort of big acquisition, and I think, for Pistons fans, right, we got to, you look at this team and like you said, they're incredibly deep. They've been playing an 11 or 12 man rotation and winning games. You've had a young player like Jalen Duren stepping up and really looking kind of like he might be an all-star this year as that second running mate there as a star player next to Cade Cunningham. I mean, at this point, it's all about that internal development that this team has had, and I think you just kind of have to sit back and enjoy the ride. Like, they don't need another star right now. They've got one. They don't need more depth. They've got one. They're just in an enviable position here at the top of the Eastern Conference.
I'm right there with you. I like, because this is something that happens in sports, and I remember talking about this at the beginning of the season because Houston was in a somewhat similar position to the Pistons as an ascending team. But they've gone a different direction. They have a young core. They have a Thompson brother, so they have a very similar had a similar outlook. They got a coach that for some reason was let go from his former team and was a quality coach and was able to get him. Udoka obviously had the issues in Boston, so that's why he was available. Bickerstaff, I still kind of question why he was let go, but I'm glad the Pistons got him. And then you end up with a good culture driver. You got good GMs on both teams, but Houston went a radically different direction. And I don't know about you, but when they made that trade, I know a lot of people were really excited about it, and that made them one of the favorites. And it's obviously Kevin Durant's one of the better players of all time. It's not even really about his part of it. I like that they're staying the course of, like you said, they've got younger guys, and those guys, if you give them the headroom, because that's a big thing in basketball as a whole. One of the guys that was on the show before here was talking about maybe getting a guy like Michael Porter Jr. I don't think he's a great culture fit for the Pistons. I get what he's doing there. A tall kind of stretch for 3-point shooter that can score, rebound. I get the profile. I don't think it's a great culture fit, but he's also increased his usage because he's gone from Denver, where he's an ideal situation getting fed from Murray and Jokic, to then Brooklyn, where he's got all this usage that's available, and so then he's taking a lot more shots. That's what you're doing when you're adding somebody into the fray. So you got to be careful to do that in Detroit, because right now you like that the usage is going where it is.
Yeah, you do. And I think, you just have to be confident, I think, with this Pistons team right now and into the future too, right? Like this team is built off of Cade Cunningham, a 24-year-old two-way superstar right now in the league. Is he the best player in the Eastern Conference? Like, maybe. He's got an argument. You got Jalen Duren's looking like he might be one of the best centers in the Eastern Conference as well. Sar Thompson's an all-NBA caliber defender. You can just go up and down this roster, and they have not only talent, but like you said, it's young talent. And when you're stocked full of young, talented players who are really vibing together well, the locker room seems like it's in a great place. Like you mentioned, the culture's been unbelievable all year. I mean, you even had Cade Cunningham showing his leadership chops after they win, what was it, maybe they're like 12th in a row or something, and he just wasn't happy about it because they let the Pacers come back a little bit, right? So you've got all this great stuff going on, and I think you just have to kind of sit back and realize, like, this team is this good, and they're this good with players that are this young. So you've got time, right? Let's see how far they can go with this core group. I'm right there with you. I don't think they need a big move or anything like that. I think you can be confident that not only are they good right now, but they're going to be good into the future too with this base that they have.
Exactly, because I think we're now realizing that, especially with the thing that you highlighted at the beginning, which is Duren's development. I think the big question was, okay, who's going to be the number two? I think the second, not necessarily the two in position on court, but the number two to Cade, the Robin to his Batman, because he is a guy that's going to make all of the teammates better. And I don't know even that. I think this would be good to get your idea on this here, Wes, because I think that's a somewhat outdated concept too, because it used to be almost like a video game build of these teams. Okay, you got to accumulate all these stars. It's got to be like Pokemon. You got to catch them all, and you got to put them on the team and put them in the lineup. And then, that worked for some teams and some eras and everything, especially in the modern day. LeBron was able to do that on a couple different teams and accumulate the stars. Now I feel like we're in a little bit different of an era where the teams that have tried to do that have been busting out at a little higher rate. The Clippers have been dealing with that. How many stars have we seen pass through there, including who they have now? And that's flaming out. Whereas these teams that build around these young cores with a star, it's often a guard, but a star player that can elevate his teammates. We're seeing it with Oklahoma City right now with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and what he's been able to do with everybody else that he's got there. I think the best comparison almost to the Pistons or the model that proves they can do something with what they've got is the Pacers of last year. You had Halliburton, whose style is very similar to Cade. I know Detroit fans won't like that comparison, but it's true of most people in the NBA. He's got a very similar style. He's a good leader. He gets the most out of his teammates. And then you've got a whole host of other people where, sure, Siakam was probably his number two guy, but it was hard to figure out who was 2, 3, 4, 5 through a lot of that run. You've now got the Pistons. Go ahead, Wes.
Sorry. No, it sounded like you stopped there. It must have cut out on my end. I was only going to add on that I really do think you're onto something. Where we're seeing it with OKC this year, we saw it, like you said, with the Pacers last year. It's depth nowadays. That new CBA really shook up the ability to accumulate all of that star talent, like you said. I mean, even in Detroit right now, when you start mapping out the salary cap for the next 3 or 4 years, you have to start playing some uncomfortable games about who's going to actually get paid and who's not. So I don't think it's really a coincidence that, like you mentioned, the really successful teams right now, they've got, 1, maybe 2 real legit stars, and then just a good 5 or 6 other guys that would be starters anywhere else. A couple of them are coming off the bench. And OKC's in a weird spot because they've had all that draft capital and they've drafted really well. They've probably got 15 players that would all be getting minutes across the rest of the league. But the Pistons right now too, they're not to that extent, but there are 12 players, maybe 13 that are like that too. I think you could even look at maybe a Denver or a Rockets who've gone out and gotten a Kevin Durant. They've got great depth out there too. This is more, I think that the league is not only becoming a little bit more even, a little bit more parity up and down, but also more of a team game. At least what I would have wanted as a fan too. So I'm all for it.
Oh, definitely. And you hit on the depth. That's I think the thing that we're dealing with. Why they're talking about the trade. So we got to take a break. Yeah. But I want to talk about that because I think that's why people are immediately going, well, okay, well, there's too many guys to play. Let's trade some away. But that depth has been very useful for the Pistons, and I think will be useful as the season plays out. But we'll pick up with that with Wes after the break. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Wes Davenport of the Pistons Pin Down podcast, having a good discussion about said Pistons and the NBA as a whole, because it gave me an idea too, Wes. I know you've got an economics background too, so I'm sure you like to kind of nerd out about the cap stuff. So this would be a good conversation for the off season as we kind of get into this new format of the show where we'll be doing more off-season coverage of basketball. I'd like to have more discussions of the whole salary cap thing, because I think people don't understand that to the degree. It's become much harder. I'm somebody that likes the finance side and the economics side as well. I'm not as well versed in it as you are with the current cap situation, but I think the move to the current cap lost a lot of the regular fans because the whole apron thing was much more complex than the previous rule setup.
Yeah, much more complex. And so I'm not as well versed on the finance side of it as much. I think if you want to have someone on to have like a really deep cap like numbers breakdown, our guy at Detroit Bad Boys, Kyle Metz, would be perfect for that. He's an expert there, more so than myself. But what I can speak to a little bit is if we could simplify it down, what changed is the incentives, right? So if you're up over the cap now, because the NBA is a soft cap, so there is a hard cap. It's just really, really way up there. Most teams don't even approach it. So you've got these different levels of over the cap that a team can be. And now there are some pretty severe penalties, not only for going multiple levels, right, over the cap, but there are also severe penalties for staying a certain amount of levels over the cap for multiple years in a row. That's what really got in the way for Boston this past offseason. The reason they were shedding a bunch of salary was because they had been over the cap so much for, I think it was 3 years at that point, and the luxury tax bill was way, way, way too high, and their owner couldn't do it anymore. So they had to make a change, and it made sense because of Tatum's injury. So what's really going on is that incentive change. It's no longer like a minor slap on the wrist if you have 3 superstars all getting max contracts and you go over the cap quite a bit to fill out the rest of your roster. Now you're losing picks. Now you're not able to make pretty easy, simple, like in-season trades. Because in the past, you'd be able to like trade out a second-round pick and take back a player. Well, now if you're really getting penalized, that player's contract has to be even smaller, right? So there are all these little things that just make it really painful and difficult to operate as a significantly over-the-cap team for multiple years in a row. And teams are afraid of that naturally, right? So that is why you've seen so much of a shift to depth. That's why, you've had a player this past offseason like Cam Thomas, who's a restricted free agent, pretty good player, 20-plus points per game scorer. In the past, that'd be a guy that gets a lot of money, but no one wanted to pay him. He's a restricted free agent, and that ties up your money in free agency for a little bit, and no one really had money to spend anyway because everyone was so close to the cap. So all these restricted free agents ended up getting squeezed. And it all does kind of go back to what you had brought up earlier when you're talking about the good teams right now are the teams that have many rotation caliber players that are able to step in and play some good minutes for them. If you're not a deep team in the NBA right now, your team's probably not all that great because there just aren't all that many clusters of superstars. And where they do exist, they're either older and injured, kind of like the Los Angeles Clippers, or it's a team that drafted and developed them and got really lucky or were just that good when you're looking at OKC.
It's a much more sustainable model to have kind of the draft and development side of things. I know that fans are inherently a little impatient and want their teams to get better quickly. Now, the Pistons kind of did that. You're talking about that with OKC. The Pistons did that in one of the more surprising ways possible. You could see the young core developing, but then all of a sudden they went from, the fact that they mirrored the two runs and basically had that long losing streak on pace to be one of the most losing teams ever, to then picking up with a win streak of basically kind of identical cadence, which was very interesting here early in the year. And to do that essentially a couple years apart is pretty incredible. So that's a quick turnaround with what you have.
Yeah, no kidding. I think it was Omari Sankofa from the Detroit Free Press, our guy. He mentioned that the Pistons won, I think it was their 13th win in a row on the same date against the Pacers, as they had a couple years prior lost their 13th in a row against the Pacers in the same arena. It was some wild coincidences that were going on over that winning streak.
Yeah, that was crazy, and it's with, obviously they've layered in some other players. They've got the GM, a different GM now, a different coach, and obviously the right ones in those positions. And they've been through some of the trials and tribulations that can help some of these young players learn and grow and all of that stuff. But now they are in a great position here because that part of that win streak was pretty incredible to me, that they were putting out these lineups. And I am not demeaning any of these players, because I like a lot of these depth players. I watch a lot of G League games. I watch a lot of Summer League. So I have a tendency to see some of these players before we see them kind of get elevated. So I had seen Tolu Smith play a decent amount. I've seen Dennis Jenkins play a lot. But the idea that they were putting lineups out there that were Dennis Jenkins and Javonte Green and Paul Reed, and basically missing all of their star players and 7-8 rotation players, and still continuing that streak was incredible to me, because those guys, they clearly were the right picks and were the depth players that you needed. But I don't know that we necessarily felt that way when at the beginning of the season there were people saying, hey, we need another ball handler, even though Dennis Jenkins was looming and in one of the two-way spots, or hey, we need kind of a 3-and-D guy, and then Javonte Green wanders his way on to the back end of the roster. Seemingly every move like that has worked for the Pistons thus far.
Yeah, it has, and I think to me probably the most surprising thing out of all of it was how individually unsurprising it really was. Like, you look at Paul Reed. We know Paul Reed's a good player. He's overqualified as a third big. He's just very undersized. So, it's been difficult for him to stick around elsewhere in the NBA. But he's a perfect fit here culture-wise, and a perfect fit here for what the Pistons want to do, just because he's so disruptive defensively, and he can go get a bucket when he really needs to. Like Paul Reed having a couple of good games, that makes sense. Dennis Jenkins too. I know he's on a two-way, but he ended last season's G League season on a real big hot streak. He was playing incredible basketball. Comes into the Summer League this past offseason, and he lights up the Summer League too. He looked too good for the Summer League. It was him and Ron Holland. They just looked like they didn't belong there at all. And so, it's not surprising when he just kind of takes that performance and he's doing the exact same thing, right, in NBA games. It's the same thing with Javonte Green. Like, we can go all the way up and down this roster. The 13 guys that have played and gotten minutes, that they individually were playing well. It's not necessarily surprising. What's more surprising is that the the Pistons were able to still win the games with those guys being featured pieces, right? Because you were missing Duran, you were missing Cade, you were missing Asar Thompson a little bit in there. And I think at that point, like, you know, when you're looking at the roster and you're saying, okay, yes, they have the talent. These guys are all clearly talented basketball players, proven that they're NBA rotation pieces. So you can, you know, stick them out there and they're not going to go lose you the game. Now you start to have to give JB, the coaching staff, and Cade Cunningham a little bit of credit, because I'm not one that usually believes in culture wins in the NBA, but it certainly looks like there is an established standard for how Pistons basketball is going to be played on a night-to-night basis. And credit to the guys in the locker room, but nobody wanted to let that standard down, even when they had a lot of injuries. So I you know, it's a credit, I think, to the coaching staff, to the leadership in the locker room, that, man, like, you looked at Dennis Jenkins, you know, he doesn't want to let down, you know, Cade, who's out, or you looked at Paul Reed and he's doing his best Isaiah Stewart impression out there, and you know, that's about as close to a culture wins as I think I've ever seen.
Oh, I would say so. And I know the word culture gets thrown around a lot, especially in Detroit, but these teams are clearly trying to protect it too. The fact that they have something that they know is working, that's why they are careful in the pieces that they add in, because that does affect the ecosystem of a team. The other thing that I was thinking when you were talking about kind of that team building aspect and the young players and the young core is the fact that I think one of the things that gets lost on people with the whole team building thing is the fact that you can pay different prices for the same thing depending on where you are as a team. For example, we can use the Pistons as an example. When they were losing, it was hard for them to acquire free agents. They weren't exactly a marquee destination for people. They were losing. You have people that don't necessarily, I'm not saying anything about Detroit specifically here, but it's the Midwest. It's cold. It's, it's not necessarily the appeal where you can go down to South Beach and take them out there when you're trying to recruit a guy. It's not quite the same thing. So you don't have that bigger market appeal. There's some things that aren't the same. But if you're trying to recruit somebody in that era, then you're often going to have to overpay or wait till the market's kind of picked over. But if you've got a young team that now has developed and now you are a destination, sure, you're still in Detroit, but you're a pretty warm destination as far as a player that's looking to kind of revive their career, a Duncan Robinson. I know that was kind of a trade element there, but somebody like a Duncan Robinson or a Karis LeVert, they're looking at this young core and going, hey, this can be something. I want to join this team. And then you're not having to pay the same amount for those players. Plus you're drafting the current players on your roster and then often being able to get them to stay under different circumstances and different terms and not necessarily having to overpay through the free agent process. So I think that's a part that gets lost on people too from a team building aspect.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. And, you bring up Karis LeVert, Duncan Robinson. Those are looking like fantastic signings right now. Duncan Robinson's floor spacing is just vital to that starting lineup. They need him to be a gunner, and he has been. Karis LeVert's been great off the bench. He's almost up. I think he's a little bit over now, 40% from three, Ryan. Like, for as cold as he started, Karis LeVert is looking really, really strong right now, and he's even been a solid defender, I thought, in these recent weeks as well. So those are looking like great signings. Before we went to break, you brought up the idea, well, it's expensive to go and trade for another like real star level piece, and I think this all just fits right into that, right? Because when you're looking at this Pistons team, and we're having this conversation about the depth, right? They've got a Paul Reed, they've got a Dennis Jenkins. We haven't even brought up Marcus Sasser, who in short minutes went and scored, I think, 7 points in about 3 or 4 minutes in garbage time. Like, that's an NBA player right there. Gets faster. Jaden Ivey's still working his way back. He's still on kind of a minutes restriction. He hasn't played much over 15 minutes a night as he's getting his legs back under him. So there are players still on this team that already aren't getting as many minutes, as many opportunities as they probably will moving forwards. And maybe in Sasser's case, unless injury even shows up. And I think that if it were me, right, and we're going to try to, have like a fireside chat with some Pistons fans, it would be to shift the framing of this depth thing in our minds, because it's not a problem that a player like Marcus Sasser is good and is not getting minutes. That's a luxury, right? It's not a problem that Paul Reed is well overqualified as a third center, and on most nights he doesn't play. That's a luxury, because when something like over that winning streak happens, when you're down Cade, well, you got Dennis Jenkins, or you're down Duran, and you got a Paul Reed, or Isaiah Stewart's in foul trouble, right? And Javonte Green can step up and play even more minutes as the 4, right? Like this. That's what deep teams have, and to just kind of get rid of that because, well, they got too many players, I think that's just the wrong way to look at it. They have too many players, and that's a good thing. That's where I'm at right now.
Oh, exactly. Plus, you're reducing the minute load of all of these guys over the course of the regular season. So when you head into the off season, you've got fresher legs to make a longer run here potentially. But
sure, yeah.
But great stuff. I appreciate the discussion, and we'll look forward to having you back on here when you're available. I know you got a busy schedule, but be sure to tell people where they can follow you here in the meantime too.
Yeah, Ryan, thank you so much. I appreciate coming on. Like always, this has been great. So you guys, if you're listening, the Pistons Pulse, I produced that podcast for the Detroit Free Press. That's our guy Omari Senko for the second. If you're not reading him, make sure that you are. We've also got Bryce Simon on that one for Motor City Hoops. He's doing a really great Substack too. So if you guys aren't reading that, it's free, and you could get detailed game breakdowns from a guy that actually does real scouting work. So it's an incredible resource if you just want to learn a little bit more about the game. And if you want to listen to my voice more frequently, well, then my friend Blake Silverman, we do the Pin Down for Detroit Bad Boys, a podcast every week where we do basically a mailbag show. You could even call in. We've got a number where you can leave a voicemail and we play your voice on the show. And otherwise, just make sure you're following Detroit Bad Boys. And Ryan, I think I covered that all. There's a lot that I had to get through, so apologies for taking too long.
Oh, no problem. It was great stuff, and you can hear all those people on the show too. All those people have been on, and hopefully we'll get them back on as the season progresses, as well as yourself. So we appreciate you coming on, and we'll look forward to having you back on.